The Jewish story. This week's story from the Holocaust is taken from the book Rethinking the Holocaust, written by Yehuda Bauer. Rescue attempts. Let us come back to the dismal chronology of rescue attempts. In June 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union, and the mass murder of Jews in the occupied Soviet territories began. The Soviets were in full retreat, and it was only at the gates of Leningrad, Moscow and Stalingrad that the German advance was stopped, at a tremendous cost in Soviet lives. Did the West know what was happening? Well, historians, especially Richard Breitman, have found that the British decoders of German radio messages had read German order police messages from occupied Soviet territories between July and September 1941. The decryptions documented the killing of many people, and in a number of cases Jews were explicitly mentioned. There is proof that these messages reached Churchill's desk. In one instance, an officer analyzing the reports concluded that a campaign to exterminate the Jews was going on. The fact that the German police are killing all the Jews that fall into their hands should now be sufficiently well appreciated. The messages dried up after mid-September 1941 after an order from Berlin forbidding the transmission of sensitive details about murder actions by radio. Two questions arise. First, did the British continue to analyze the decoded messages, or indeed take their analysis seriously? Was it even possible to deduce from the material at the disposal of the British that a Europe-wide extermination of Jews was being conducted? Recent German research indicates that in the summer of 1941, the decision to kill all European Jews had not yet been taken. How could the British divine that the Nazis will later make their decision? Breitman has shown that some of these analysts who read these messages had reached the conclusion that Soviet Jews were being annihilated. The problem is that these analyses did not reach the Foreign Office. They had no measurable impact on British policy, because they are unknown except to a very few people. Churchill used the information in a speech on August 24, 1941, for propaganda purposes, as Breitman shows, but there it ended. The second question is even more serious. If the British government, and not just a few analysts, had drawn the conclusion that what they were witnessing was a genocide, the term had not yet been coined, what could they have done to save the millions of victims? In the summer of 1941, the Soviets were in full and hasty retreat. The British forces had just been roundly defeated in Greece and Crete, and the Battle of the Atlantic was not going well for Britain. The United States was neutral. The British could have done nothing, even if they had wanted to save the European Jews from annihilation. But clearly, they didn't want to. They could have done important things on the margins. They could have permitted more Jews to escape from Balkans to Palestine, which they refused to do. They could have made public declarations of policy. A year later, they could have permitted illegal transfers of funds through Switzerland to West European countries. Practically speaking, their options were limited, as was their realization of what was going on, even though that one British officer more intuitively than otherwise analyzed the situation correctly, as we know with hindsight. Could the British have warned the threatened Jews in the fall of 1941? In the Soviet areas, Jews had no radio receivers that could tune in to London. Under Soviet rule, no such receivers were permitted, and once the Germans invaded, Jews who had radios had them confiscated. Mass murder commenced immediately, first of men and soon thereafter of women and children. Jews no longer needed to be warned because most were victims, and those who were not saw with their own eyes what the Germans were doing. Whether the British could have used their knowledge of what was happening on Soviet territory to extrapolate on German policy in Western and Central Europe is a further question. Even assuming they could have done that, a very large assumption, would they have been believed? On the strength of what we know today about attitudes of Jews and non-Jews toward German policy, this is extremely unlikely. On the other hand, had the British, and not just the occasional intelligence analyst, believed what they were reading, they might well have found a way of publicizing the material without endangering their decoding operation. In that case, and the putative dilemma arose often during the next 3 years, they could have shown they cared. The question is therefore a moral one, not a practical one. Morality aside, I have argued many times that the information may have been there, but not knowledge, not an understanding of what the information meant. Here probably only a few attained that knowledge, and they did not manage to convince others. Please pass on this story.